Right, this is quite a serious subject, in fact, a very serious subject.
Yes, it is.
Communities have been ripped apart by the failures, again, of the police. Now, how much more of a police criticism does this programme have to become? I'm getting so fed up with those people in charge of the police. If I did something wrong, I'd be down there tomorrow. They'd pull me in, by my collar, probably. Yeah. A report has found that the abuse of young girls by Asian men is happening in the town, been happening since 2003, and it was not, between 2003 2012, it was not properly investigated and the victims were ignored. Now, my next guest, Maggie Oliver, former detective with Greater Manchester Police, joins me now. You've been working very hard to bring some sense and some closure to this, but it's not going. A report found young girls were abused by a network of Asian men, 96 who pose a potential risk to children still remain at large. What on earth? Is it the police are just scared of being accused to be racist? What is going on? Hello, by the way, Maggie.
Hi, Maggie.
Hello, Maggie.
Hello, hi. I've lost count of the number of interviews I've done this week, and
just relax with us. It'll be fun.
I will just relax, and I won't swear. I'll be good.
You can swear.
No, swear as much as you like.
Oh well, I might do, depending on where I go with this conversation. But I mean, this has been. I mean, the first thing I would say is that it is not just a story of Rochdale. This is about failures in the police. As you just said, I was a serving police officer with Greater Manchester Police, and in 2010 I was asked to join this job, which was the Rochdale Grooming gang scandal. In 2011 I realised that they were not doing a proper job. We had dozens of abusers, and we had about 3 dozen children who we knew were being abused.
Right.
And yet, for the second time in my career, I saw an investigation being ring-fenced to a tiny number of children and all the others being cast aside. And now this official report confirms that was because, once again, the police wouldn't put resources into it.
Why not? When you must have asked, Maggie, why were they not prepared to do it? I mean, there must be gangs like this, not necessarily Asian. I believe that the one gang there was mostly people from Pakistan, but there are people from different countries as well. They don't see the police, that is. They don't seem to be interested in looking into any of this. Why?
I think, back at the beginning of this journey, I went to the Chief Constable, who, Peter Fye, just like in the post office scandal, he has now been knighted. He is now Sir Peter Fye. When I went to him, he just wouldn't meet me. He wouldn't speak to me. I put a document together telling him that I was in despair about the way these children were being treated. At that time, though, James, I thought it was a lazy officer. Now, 12 years later, I believe that this is a story about police failures, and not just towards victims of grooming gangs, because from our previous conversations that I started my own charity in 2019, and we support and fight for victims of sexual violence, not just grooming gang victims, but victims of sexual violence to have justice. And yet we are repeatedly seeing those victims being pushed aside, silenced. And, the complaints procedure, the process is broken. It doesn't work. Police are investigating themselves. And to date, in all these years, if we're talking about Rochdale, you've got to also talk about Rotherham and Telford and Oxford.
And look, cities like Birmingham that we never hear about. It's going on all over the country, Maggie.
It is, and yet I believe all these investigations into these gangs have been limited through decisions made by chief constables and those at the top that they weren't going to put resources in.
Well, you got pushed out of Greater Manchester Police because you raised the issues, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, by speaking out, I was told really, I was threatened that if I went public with it, that I should be very, very careful. I would go to prison because what I only knew because I was a serving police officer. Peter Fay went on national radio and said that I was a woman who had been bereaved. I became too emotionally involved. Basically, I lost the plot. And it's taken 12 years for this report to confirm every single word that I said was true. God. And yet, Peter Fay and other chief constables, and actually I have to say Nazir Afzal, who was the head of the CPS, not one of them has been held to account.
They got put into special measures in Greater Manchester.
Have, in your view, Maggie, I don't want to upset you, and I know some of these things do upset you a lot, I can hear from your voice. Is there something you think illegal going on behind the scenes? Is there somebody somewhere, bribing people? Is there somebody very high up who's stopping this? Because at the moment, I would have thought it would be fairly easy to get the evidence that is needed to make arrests.
It's not about evidence. It's about a lack of investigation, a lack of priority. And for me, this is about leadership. I'm not blaming individual officers on the ground. You get good and bad in every organisation.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you get a chief constable who dismisses me when he knows full well what is going on, that is a gross criminal neglect. It's neglect of duty.
In public office, actually, is it?
In a public office. It's misconduct in a public office. It's malfeasance. And these were deliberate failures. And if you read the Rochdale, this latest review, which is that one, it's like War and Peace. And yet, if anybody wants to read it, that report is honest. I could have written it 12 years ago, but that makes very clear that behind all these decisions, like individuals, yes, they are systemic failures, but the people at the top of the police are allowing these decisions. They are making
local MPs, Maggie. Are local MPs not getting involved in this because they damn well ought to be?
They don't want to be. I mean, you're covering this today, but, the media and MPs tend to think that it's only what happens in London that matters. If this was the Met, it would be all over the TV all week and all the time.
Maggie, can I ask you very quickly, is it going to take an ITV drama to uncover the real scandal of this, like it did with the post office scandal? Because I know friends that really has affected, and they said if it wasn't for the ITV drama, it would never have come to light like it had. Maybe this is going to have to happen here.
I mean, I could be Mr. Bates, very easily. This has been 12 years of my life. Pretty much every breath I've taken has been in some way connected with fighting for victims, trying to give them a voice. And this case exposes so many things wrong, but it's not just the grooming gang cases, it's policing, which is on its knees. And I worked on the drama Three Girls, which did a great job of explaining what child abuse from the grooming gangs is like, but it never looked at the systemic failures, at the deliberate failures of the police. I talk of Rochdale and I mentioned Nazir Afzal. This report talks about the young girl Amber who was in the drama. Now, she was one of the girls that I was asked to bring on board. She was a victim of the most horrific abuse. She spent 8 months telling me what had happened to her, naming dozens of abusers. She had been confirmed as a victim before I was allowed to go anywhere near her. And 8 months later, because they decided to ring-fence this case and just take 3 children forward to court, she was pushed aside. A year later, the barrister decided her evidence was required in court to run this trial. And so in secret, James, they decided that they had to portray this child as one of the abusers. So without arresting her...
They arrested her, didn't they?
How, Maggie...
No, they didn't arrest her. They didn't caution her. They didn't tell her. They secretly put her on the indictment, and she never knew until I told her 6 months after I resigned. That is you know, it is unlawful in the extreme. This report makes that clear, and yet nobody has been held to account. The CPS still insists they did nothing wrong. I want that to change so that no other child can go through that. I want somebody like Peter Fahy, who was a chief constable, to be held criminally accountable for their failures that have cost thousands of children their sanity. And I want a change to the police complaint system that means when somebody complains, there is somebody independent scrutinising what has gone on. Unlike now, where they mark their own homework, it goes straight to the professional standards department about whom that complaint is. The IOPC don't even get made aware of it unless the police force voluntarily or based on trust refers it back to the IOPC. These are massive failures, and unless we address those things, then we will never see a change. And
but if we see MPs with a lot of constituents from that community, I saw Douglas Murray talking about this, they will go with the community because they want to get in power. This is a major problem, and with the councils as well across the country.
Well, why don't they stand up and be counted just like I have?
They'd lose the vote, wouldn't they?
All right, OK. We're running out of time. Maggie, I want to ask you a really important question, I think is important anyway. How are the lives of these young kids who have been passed from man to man, how are the lives of these young kids doing now? Have some of them been able to find a way of recovery from the appalling situation? These girls were passed around to bunches of older men and... raped. And, you know, there were kids who didn't have a good family life, kids who had nowhere to live sometimes. How are they doing?
You know what, James? I always say that the sexual abuse is horrific, but I truly believe that if the authorities who are meant to listen to them, so the police, social services, the CPS, if they are treated with respect and compassion and dignity by those services, they can recover. But when the whole system stacks against them, doesn't listen to them, blames them, they don't. Let me just read something to you very briefly. I can find it. In this report, there is a detective chief superintendent that has just retired who spoke to the review team. Police officers are unable to speak out without losing their jobs and their career and their income and their home.
Like what happened to you?
I left to speak out publicly, but this senior officer has just left, and she said, and I know her, I had a very painful last few years in Greater Manchester Police as a result of trying to push the victim's agenda in terms of vulnerability and the way we deal with victims. In particular, the way we record crimes and the ethical stuff all around it. They have an attitude that our victims are lying. And I couldn't get past this. I mean, she swears I was silenced in the live press conference with this. I was muted. But she says Greater Manchester Police is crap at dealing with victims because they don't believe them half the time. And that is a detective chief superintendent that was unable to do anything when I was shouting out about what was going on. 12 years later, when she's no longer in the job, she says that. And I'm saying that there are many, many officers who think that, but yet nobody is held to account. The system is broken. Yeah. We need systemic changes to so many areas. And if we had a drama like the post office one, it would uncover all these nasty things hanging in the corners. It shouldn't take a drama to do that.
They need to be held to account, though, Maggie.
Maggie, it's always good to chat, and we will continue to give publicity to this issue. But for the moment, Maggie, thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a break.